Hey folks, this is Alan. So for my latest Quixotian endeavor, a neighbor down here in Alabama has this old log cabin that he wants moved off his property, and just seemed like too good of an opportunity to try a crazy project to see if I could move this over to our land and disassemble it and put it back together again and use it for a little fishing cabin next to our pond over there. So I'm going to try and chronicle this with a series of videos just to let you guys follow along with what we're doing and all the mistakes that I make, and let's see how this thing turns out. So here's a quick overview of the cabin. It's a one-room log cabin, about 20 feet long in the front, by the front door here, and then along the side with the chimney on both sides there, it's about 15 feet deep. It's just one story, but I think there's the potential to put maybe a loft bed in the top. I think we're going to have to take down the chimney and completely reassemble that, and it looks like we'd probably have to take off the front and back porches and the roof, and then label the logs and take the logs one by one over to our new place. Everything looks to be in pretty good shape. I'd say about 70% of the logs are good, but we'll have to either source or come up with some new logs to replace those. And I'm thinking about putting, there's actually some logs underneath for the foundation that seem to be in pretty good shape, and I may try and reuse those and put in a more modern dimensional lumber foundation on cinder blocks. This thing's been resting on just a pile of rocks, just barely off the ground for who knows how long. So hoping to get some more history on it, but I think that's the general overall plan. And gonna try and do either a little bit of a wraparound porch, replace these porches because they do shield the logs from rain, which is the main thing. I'd be worried about them continuing to have exposure to water. If we can keep those away from the rain, that's going to be good. So looking at the construction and some of the positives and negatives, advantages, disadvantages that I think we're dealing with here is, first of all, we've got this old chimney, which is beautiful, but I don't know that we're going to be able to save it, obviously move it. So we're going to probably have to knock it down and rebuild it. And then on each side of the cabin, we've got 9 logs stacked on top of each other. And the whole thing really is resting on this beam here, which is a good size, 10 by 10, 11 by 11 heartwood beam, which it's fascinating that this thing has been literally sitting on the ground probably for decades, if not 100 years or more, and it's in really good shape. There's no termite damage at all that I can tell in this particular one. Now we've got some damage underneath the porch and several of these rafters underneath the porch, the joists there, like this one's completely gone, and some along the back are gone. So this porch is pretty much gone, but you can see that this whole structure basically is supported on all 4 corners by these stacked logs that lie on these beams. And if you go up and look, it's really cool to see the joints. Some of these are not in great shape, but if you get up here to some of these, you can see the dovetail joint here. So it's angled away. The notch here is angled away, so this is supposed to represent the tail of a dove, where you've kind of got it fans out, it's wider here, narrow here, and then it's flat here, and then angles again up here. And then if you go on the other side and look, it's the exact opposite, and they just nest into each other all the way up, and this corner supports the entire building. And you've got logs all the way across here, and the same construction on each corner. So basically it's these four corners that almost act like four corner posts that hold up the entire structure. And what's always fascinated me a little bit, there's no chinking. I've always thought that with a log cabin you were supposed to try and get the logs as close together as possible, but the more research I've done, this gap is actually good because it allows for the logs sort of to breathe and there to be a little bit of a gap between the logs to let the rainwater wash off, and you're supposed to fill this with chinking. In this particular case, they've just got some like panel board that they had tacked up here, and it's always amazed me a little bit about how the doors, how they can stand up. I mean, there's not much in here holding this up. This little 1x6 is nailed to the log, and that's all that it needs to keep that steady, again, because the corner is held down by the dovetail joints here, and all the weight is here. There's really not that much weight here, and then of course the log above it holds more weight, and that's a solid log all the way across. So the only thing you need to do is really tack this in and hold it up, apparently. So looking underneath, there you've got the front porch on literally just a stack of rocks, and then here's the main floor joist on the front corner of the cabin, and that's that massive beam that is in really good shape. I don't know how much you can see under here, but it's literally just resting on these three rocks. That's the foundation, and underneath it you can see these floor joists, which are logs in and of themselves going across the cabin. We'll probably replace that with dimensional lumber so that we can use some of these logs that are actually seem to be in pretty good shape, may be able to reuse those on the exterior. But you can see that really solid 11-inch by 11-inch floor joist beam. That's the front of the cabin, and you go around and you've got the exact same thing on the back of the cabin, and those two logs, or those two beams, actually hold the whole thing up. So here's a better look at the front floor beam, or foundational beam. Here's the rocks that it's resting on, and it's kind of neat. You can see how the front porch, these logs were just laid, literally just kind of hewn there a little bit and bevel cut and shoved on top of the main beam there, and run across to this other beam that's on the front and resting on these three stacks of rocks. And then they just literally put the floor panels, nailed those on top of the logs out front. Here on the exterior, they put some board and batten siding on there, which is good because that helped preserve the logs a little bit. We've taken some of them off, and you can see in here, this is one of the grosser aspects of the squirrel and perhaps even rat nests that were in here, where they just had their nice little nesting material all woven in between the boards and the logs themselves. But the good news is, I think, you know, some of these are in pretty good shape. You can see this log is worn away with the kind of the exterior of the log, so the circumference has worn away, and this is the softer wood, but the heartwood is still very, very solid and still there. And you can sort of see the same thing happening here. So this was sort of the first 1.5 inches of the log. This part's a little soft, but inside that heartwood is very, very solid. So I don't know how much of this we'll be able to reuse. This one goes a little bit deeper, and this is the bottom log, so that one we may have to replace, especially when you look down here. You can see this has some termite damage in the exterior, but again, the heart of the log is in pretty good shape. But this one above it is in much better condition, because the entire log, except for some of this here a little bit is in pretty good shape. Here's a better view of the dovetail joint. So this one's in really good shape. So you can see here that it's angled here. So the notch is angled on this log down, and on this log it's flat. But in this way, the water can run away from the building, and it holds this next log in place so that it doesn't move. And then you go up here, and then this one is angled this way. Actually, you can see it better here. It's down this way, so again, the water runs away, and then the water runs away, and then the water runs away. So it's kind of this down, and it just alternates back and forth on how it's built in the corners. What's kind of neat out here is that top log. They left it long, and it extends out about 3 feet. And there's an additional overhang both on the porch, and then if you look up there, there's an overhang around the chimney, and that protects this side of the cabin from rain, and then it also shelters, keeps rain from running down the chimney, I suspect. But on both sides, you've got this extension of a log there, which is really cool. I wish we had it on both sides, so I may end up adding a lean-to on the other side, which doesn't have that. That's where the board and batten was, on this side. So this side doesn't have an overhang, so it has a lot more exposure to the elements. And I'm guessing eventually, when we rebuild it, we may put a little lean-to over here to protect this side of the building. Here's a little bit about how the roof and the ceiling and the front porch are constructed. So if you've got the top log here, you've got some pole rafters notched into the top here, and then you've got little roof rafter peeking through there, and then you've got a porch rafter and a roof rafter there nestled together, and you see the notch and the top log, and they're just I'm assuming nailed there in the top, and then across they just overlap, and one goes toward the roof and the other goes out towards the porch, and the entire roof just rests on those pole rafters. And here you can see on the outside where the ceiling rafters come through. So these are just the pole rafters that poke through and rest on that, I guess, third from the top log across the top, and then that's what holds the ceiling in place, which are just boards laid across those rafters as they rest along those logs all the way across the ceiling. I don't know how much you can see up here, but this is the attic. You've got the pole rafters overlaid with plywood, so that's obviously not particularly historic, but eventually we could put a loft up here, I think, and may put a more modern roof on it, but make it look period appropriate as much as possible. Leave it tin, for example.